Good morning, I hope everyone's well today. Thank you for watching. I've seen a clip online on Twitter, X as it's commonly known now, and it's from what I would describe as a Tory wet. Now officially he's non-affiliated, but I think he's right-leaning. His name is Charles Moore, and he insists that it would have been uncivilised for Margaret Thatcher to take on Enoch Powell's advice and reverse much of Britain's post-war immigration experiment in the 1980s. So that was obviously, I think it was the British Nationality Act or something along those lines in 1948 that is being referred to in the video, which allowed many former empire or imperial possessions, their natives and their people to emigrate to the United Kingdom. So that's the context of the video, and it fundamentally changed the relationship of British citizens with our democracy and the government. I'm going to play the clip first of all, and it illuminates why the Tories are going to be wiped out completely at the next election, and it's also very instructive to how the Liberal elites view things.
In 1978, before she was Prime Minister, people don't want to be swamped. She was much attacked by the left of the party for saying it. But the trouble was Enoch Powell, his eloquence, and some people would say his extremism, terrified politicians off the subject. So he may even have achieved the opposite of what he intended by raising it, because it became sort of unsayable. It wasn't completely unsayable by her, and she always maintained it. And it's very interesting that the far right never got a look in her time. She squashed them electorally completely, where they were actually beginning to rise in the 1970s.
If I may just say one, one of the major points that Powell made in 1968 is that we had already, to some extent, piled up our own funeral pyre.
Yes.
This looks more and more vindicated by the day in Britain. We are being swamped, whether or not Thatcher would have liked us to have been swamped. Powell wasn't just urging for a break on numbers, he was urging for civilised reversal of what had already happened. She admired him. I don't think she was particularly squeamish about his, not just his restrictionism, but about his desire to reverse it. Why did she do that?
I would say that it wasn't civilised to reverse it, because in order to do it effectively in enough numbers, you would have had to kick people out, and that would not have been civilised. They had arrived by perfectly legitimate means.
We're going to leave that there. That's pretty much the end of that video, and I want to hone in on the words civilised and uncivilised that Mr. Moore has mentioned in the video. The essence of democracy is that we resolve things, anything political, at the ballot box, instead of a violent revolution like other countries have. As Churchill once said, democracy is the best of all the options, it's better than the alternatives, which is why we have democracy. So for example, say next time we elect a government, and their manifesto is mass deportations, ending indefinite leave to remain, and even going as far to make sure that anyone post-1997, it's on the table whether they can be evicted from Britain or not. Let's just say that's the policy platform of Advance UK or Reform UK at the next election. None of that is uncivilised, and this is why the Tory party and the Tory wets are irrelevant, and they are now a electoral irrelevance. They are a hindrance. They didn't jump on the train, so they need to get off the tracks, and this is the mindset of the Oxbridge elite. They see it as it's their duty, it's their moral right to impose their view on the wider population. I want to thank Harrison, and I want to thank the New Culture Forum for bringing this to my attention, because this is where I've got this information from. But this is very instructive. This is what we're dealing with. This is the typical. He probably thinks he's probably right of centre. He probably thinks that he's making a reasoned and impassioned response. He's not. He's revealing his true nature and his true hand. It doesn't impact them. It's not in their backyard, so they don't care. And it's better to be wrong and liked than to be right and disliked. That's the issue with the Tories. That's the first clip. Now, from the horse's mouth, Margaret Thatcher on Enoch.
Was the best parliamentarian I ever knew. Everything in Enoch's speeches had to be worked out in reason, from first principles. He was, of course, the very first person to realise that inflation had nothing to do with prices and incomes. It was to do with the money supply. And if you put the money supply up, then up would go the prices and incomes. But it was the money supply, though, and the interest rate you had to look at. And he was the first person to realise that.
So that's Margaret on Enoch, the best Prime Minister we never had. He did leave the Tories. I believe it was voluntary, or he jumped before he was pushed, and that was in 74. After he left the Tories, he actually stood in Northern Ireland in South Down as an MP, and he was the best parliamentarian that came from Northern Ireland in my view. Churchill, Scotland, and Powell for Northern Ireland, and they had him for 13 years for the Ulster Unionist Party. I'm going to play this final clip now, and this is of Enoch himself. Comment below after watching this clip if you can detect any lies. In my view, he's actually understating the gravity of the situation. He probably didn't think the Tories and Labour would be so catastrophically stupid. We'll give him credit because he was ahead of the curve before it was the trendy thing to be. So we'll play the clip now.
Concerned with the increase in an element of a population which is profoundly different, thinks itself different, is seen as different from the rest. And that is where the significance both of number and of concentration comes in. Now, it could be as serious, indeed it could be more serious, if that different population were white and not coloured. I can well imagine that if they were, for example, Germans or Russians, who were going to be occupying 2/5 or a half of Birmingham at the beginning of the next century, we should... Yes, in occupation, living there. But as with some of your American cities, a considerable proportion. In the case of Birmingham, it will be at least 2/5 will be occupied by the immigrants and their descendants by the early years of the next century.
Above all, the descendants.
Yes, indeed. But they will, those descendants will still be thoroughly separate for the most part from the rest of the population because of the numbers. If the numbers were small, then of course, like any very small minority, they would filter into the population. But nobody seriously imagines that if 2/5 of Birmingham consists of a first generation of descendants born here, of people from the West Indies, from Africa and from Asia, there will not be a profound difference.
So we'll leave that one there. Now I want to circle back to the original video. I'm not going to play it again. What Charles Moore says that it would be uncivilised. No, it wouldn't, because as I say, it's the best system we have. Anything that a populace elects its government to do should be done, because the next time the Parliament can be voted out, if the populace doesn't like the results, they can be voted out. That's the whole point. So the situation is, when he says it would be uncivilised to arrange mass deportations, he's being really dumb. He's treating us all for mugs, he's treating us all for fools. It's perfectly reasonable and it's perfectly legitimate. No parliament can bind another, no piece of legislation is immune from the will of the population. If we don't like something like the Nationality Acts of 81 and 48, repeal them, change them. Alright, that's the will of the population in action. That's exactly how civilised democracy should work. If you don't like it, campaign against a policy. Don't say it's uncivilised. Oh, it's off the table, can't touch that, that's beyond the pale, we're not allowed to touch that. No. Everything needs to be debated and everything needs to be on the table. That's the only way, when you get the competition and the actual debate of ideas, that's the only way we get anywhere. This is what's been missing from British politics for, I'd say, at least the past 60 or 70 years. The intellectual quality of the politicians leaves a lot to be desired. I could debate any of them under the table, and that's not saying much at all, because I really don't care. Anyway, if you like this video, give me a thumbs up, give me a like and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video. You have a good day, and thank you for your time.